You probably ate 3 meals today. Maybe you skipped one. Maybe dinner was reheated, eaten standing at the counter, half watching your phone. You didn't think about it. You never do. For a medieval person, food was the center of everything, not aesthetic, not identity. The central problem of every single day. How to get it, how to keep it, how to survive the months when it ran short. What ended up on a medieval plate wasn't a choice, it was the result of season, class, religion, and luck. And it tells you more about how medieval society actually worked than almost anything else. So let's look at the plate, both of them. Because in medieval Europe, two completely different cuisines ran side by side in the same villages, on the same streets, separated not by taste, but by the accident of birth. Start at the bottom, because the bottom is where most people were. The peasant diet was built on one thing: pottage. Not a recipe, a category. A thick stew simmered in a pot that in many households never fully emptied and never fully cooled. You added to it, you took from it, it was always there. The base was grain: oats, barley, rye, wheat where the soil allowed. To it went whatever the garden produced: leeks, onions, cabbage, turnips, peas. Herbs for flavor, and in medieval medical theory for health. Maybe a handful of dried mushrooms. But here's the part that surprises people. Meat was not the centerpiece, it was a seasoning. A pig was too valuable alive, producing lard, eating waste, convertible to cash, to be eaten casually. When it was finally slaughtered each autumn, nothing was wasted. The blood became pudding. The organs were eaten first before they spoiled. The salted joints hung in the rafters, rationed through winter, added to the pot a few ounces at a time, not to fill the bowl, to flavor it. And then there was fish. Roughly 150 days a year, the church forbade meat entirely, every Friday, every Saturday, all of Lent. On those days, salted herring carried the working body through the field, cheap, preservable, available everywhere, and by most accounts, miserable to eat after months in a barrel of brine. People ate it anyway, there was no alternative. Bread was everywhere, but not the same bread. Peasants ate dark maslin loaves, dense and heavy, nothing like the soft white bread we picture. Stale bread thickened the pottage. It also became the plate itself, a trencher, a thick slice that soaked up juices and was eaten last or thrown to the dogs. Ale finished the picture. Not water, ale. Safer to drink, calorie-dense, brewed from grain. Even children drank it, in weaker form. This wasn't indulgence, it was survival math. Pottage, dark bread, a scrap of salted fish, ale. Day after day, season after season. Monotonous by your standards, sufficient most years to power one of the hardest physical lives in human history. Now look at the other table, raised on a dais, draped in white linen, set with silver and Venetian glass. The noble relationship with food was never about nutrition, it was about power. Start with the bread, white bread, wheat sifted painstakingly to remove the bran that darkened a peasant's loaf. Expensive, soft, considered in medieval medical theory the only bread fit for a refined body. Eating white bread was a statement about exactly who you were. The meat arrived in a quantity the peasant a mile away could not imagine. Roasted beef, whole peacocks redressed in their own feathers after cooking. Venison, from the Lord's own forest, hunting it punishable as a serious crime for anyone beneath him. Animals the peasant could see from his field and never legally touch. And then the spices. This is where it gets interesting. Black pepper, cinnamon, ginger, saffron, shipped across half the known world through dozens of hands, each one adding cost, until a single pound of pepper in medieval England cost roughly a week's wages for a skilled laborer. Nobles didn't use spice because they craved heat, they used it because it announced something. A dish heavy with cinnamon told every guest at the table, I have access to commodities that crossed an ocean to reach me. The sauces were elaborate: verjus, almonds, wine, spice, simmered into thick constructions with names like cameline and galantine. This was not primitive cooking, it was technically demanding, deliberate, and genuinely excellent. And then sugar, sculpted into castles, animals, coats of arms, displayed as a centerpiece before being smashed apart and eaten. A luxury so rare it was treated less like food and more like spectacle. The meal itself was theater. Courses arrived in procession, announced by trumpets. Where you sat at the table determined what reached your plate, the finest cuts near the Lord, plainer food further down the hall, a visible, edible map of exactly where you stood. But here is what sits between these two tables, the thing the history books almost never mention: the church. Medieval Christianity didn't just tell people when to fast, it shaped what an entire continent ate for roughly half the days of the year, a legal obligation enforced by the whole community watching. On fasting days, meat vanished from both tables. For the peasant, this changed almost nothing: more pottage, more herring. For the noble, it triggered something stranger, an entire parallel cuisine built to satisfy the letter of the law while gutting its spirit. Pike dressed in spiced sauce, salmon roasted whole, salt cod transformed by technique into something that bore no resemblance to the barrel it came from. Marzipan castles that contained no meat and therefore passed every test. The fast day table in many noble households was more elaborate than the meat day table. Wherever there's money and motive, no rule survives fully intact. And the church's calendar did something no one intended. By forcing fish onto every table in Europe 150 days a year, it built an entire fishing economy from nothing. It drove the salt trade across the continent. It created the preservation technology that would later provision armies and the ships that crossed an ocean most people in this story never knew existed. The medieval plate was never just food, it was theology, it was rank, it was the clearest signal of who you were in a world with almost no other way to broadcast it. The peasant's pottage and the noble's spiced swan were not just different meals, they were the same hour, the same village, two completely different languages, spoken across a gap neither side could cross. We've forgotten to read them, but the story hasn't changed as much as you think. You are what you eat, the saying goes. In medieval Europe, they meant it literally.